Hi everyone, welcome to another DSLayered podcast series. I'm Joshua Fletcher and I'm joined today by Ethan Jewett. Hey Ethan.
Hey. Hi Josh.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
This is a bit of an experiment for us. Yeah,
In
no,
many
thank
ways.
you. Yeah, big experiment. So Ethan, you're an SAP mentor, and where are you in the world?
I'm currently based in Madison, Wisconsin. So it's a nice little city, which is near Chicago, for those of you who aren't that familiar with U.S. geography. It's a little bit northwest of Chicago, which is where I spent 10 years working as a BW, BPC consultant in the SAP world. So it's kind of, close to home relatively.
Excellent.
And you, Josh?
And that's what we... yeah, I'm in Perth, in Western Australia, which apparently is one of the most remote cities in the world, in terms of distance from other cities. So yeah, complete opposite side of the world, I guess. So today we wanted to start a podcast series on BW, SAP Business Warehouse, and that's your area of expertise, Ethan. And there's been quite a lot of discussion in the last 6 months around BW and its future in the SAP BI portfolio. What have been your thoughts on that, Ethan?
Well, I think there was a lot of confusion for a while, myself included. It wasn't really clear what the idea was with BW going forward. I mean, after the acquisition of BusinessObjects, BW kind of came out of the limelight as far as business intelligence tools in the SAP ecosystem, and then with the kind of maturing of HANA and the acquisition of Sybase, there was even more confusion around the data warehousing space and where BW fits in. So for a couple of years there was a lot of talk about HANA and very little talk about data warehousing problems, data management problems. And that kind of thing. But I think now we're getting back to basics in a way, but also to like the really complicated stuff, which is nice to see. So now when SAP talks about its real-time data platform, which is what's been kind of the theme that's been coming out of TechEd, we're really seeing BW as pretty central to that, as the central EDW concept for the real-time data platform, and is also kind of a broker for data in the real-time data platform, as far as BW is what would run the nearline storage process, which determines what data goes in HANA versus what data goes in IQ or another nearline storage system. So it's serving a couple of different roles in that platform, but primarily focused on this enterprise data warehousing concept. So that's where it's been positioned for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's good to see that BW is kind of like finding its place now in SAP's story about its data management tools, which is a very diverse story at this point in time, but is kind of coming together.
Yeah, excellent. So, and I guess that's the focus of our podcast series. What we want to achieve is really, there was a lot of, as part of that discussion and confusion over the last 6 months, there was quite often discussed that BW can operate as an enterprise data warehouse, and it doesn't need an SAP ERP system in terms of connectivity. And so that's something that I guess we discussed, Ethan, and we thought, let's take this further. Let's actually, do a podcast series and prove that case in point, that we can set up a BW system. We can load some non-SAP data into it, with the BusinessObjects toolset with data services. And put BusinessObjects on top and actually demonstrate that enterprise data warehouse concept and the benefits that customers can see if they use BW instead of a more non-SAP traditional data warehousing approach, which would be, model up your star schemas, maybe the Kimball methodology, and load it into a database like Sybase IQ and put a BI tool on top of it. There's some specific benefits that customers will see if they use BW, and we want to demonstrate them as part of this podcast series, and I guess show that use case to people that don't understand BW that well as well, including me.
Yeah, so I think it'll be really good just to kind of go through things and see a little bit about how it works, because I mean I think part of what has kept people a little bit away from BW is just that it's foreign, and part of it is that it's also not totally clear what the advantages are, like you're saying. So why would I want to use BW over other modeling tools with Sybase IQ or with another database? And I think that there are some really strong arguments there, especially once you get into very complex scenarios, which a lot of businesses are dealing with. So I think we'll start to see that as we go through this podcast series. We can even talk about it a little bit today. But
Excellent. So what we wanted to start with, I guess, was talk a bit about the system architecture of Business Warehouse. So I'm a classic business objects person. BW is still very foreign to me. So can you give us a bit of insight into the architecture behind BW? What are the kind of key components? What systems does it run on? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I think there are a couple of ways we can approach this. I would like to show a couple of things in a screen share, but first let's just talk through it. So what is BW? I mean, it's a big topic. It's a big system, and it has a lot of pieces and a lot of capabilities, which really, in some ways, really confuses the message about what it is. So I'm going to touch on some of those, but what I'm going to focus on is its enterprise data warehouse component and capabilities. But what BW really is a data warehousing toolkit that's based on the NetWeaver platform. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it's database agnostic and that it's platform agnostic. So BW runs on many databases. It runs on Oracle SQL Server. It runs on HANA. It runs on IBM's DB2, and for a little while it ran on Teradata. Although that's been deprecated because SAP has decided that there wasn't very much demand for it because Teradata has its own data warehouse modeling tools, and with HANA coming to maturity, there was obviously some competition there. So it runs on several database platforms, just like ERP, SAP ERP, which also is built on the NetWeaver platform. It runs on several operating systems, so it will run on Linux or Windows or various flavors of Unix operating systems. And what's difficult about that is that it makes development sometimes a little bit slow because SAP has to support all these different platforms. But what's nice about it is that customers can use what they've decided on standardizing on for their data center. So if they're a Windows shop, they can run BW on Windows on SQL Server, and if they're a Unix shop, they can run it on whatever flavor of Unix they like on Oracle or IBM's DB2. So it's really kind of an agnostic data warehousing toolkit. Lately, it's become much more focused on HANA, so we'll touch on this later in the series. But if you run BW on HANA, which is not possible in the latest version of BW, it gives you some more capabilities that don't exist on the standard database versions of BW. So what's a data warehousing toolkit? It's a data warehousing toolkit, in my view, and this is in the sense of what BW does as well, is a way to semantically define a data warehouse in terms of objects which are not database tables, but which define data storage or data representations. And then the toolkit is in charge of making those objects real in the database layer. So based on the objects you define, in terms of BW, a cube or a data store object, which is a sort of representation of a flat table, or an info object, which is a representation of a dimension, a master data dimension. BW is in charge then of taking each of those objects that you define in the toolkit and creating the database tables for it. So what's really nice about this is that you can actually switch from platform to platform, or during an upgrade of BW, it can change the way that those tables are instantiated to get better performance. or if you upgrade your database, maybe it can take advantage of new database features. And that's all transparent to the person designing the data warehouse. You can see what's going on, so you can make decisions about what platform you want to run on, and about what types of features you want to use based on your platforms. But it's relatively transparent, so you can actually design a data warehouse on BW on Oracle, and then you can do a system copy in a couple of days or even less, and move that over to HANA, and then run a couple of conversion programs, and BW will actually redesign all of your cubes, all your data store objects, so that they're optimized for the new platform. So that's really a powerful feature, is to be able to define a semantic model. Isn't that the name of your? isn't the DSLayered kind of the semantic piece? So the ability to define a semantic model, not of a reporting structure like in the semantic layer of BusinessObjects, but of a semantic model of your data structure, and then let the toolkit deal with actually how we instantiate that model on the database level. So this is a really powerful way to design a data warehouse, because it lets you really generalize things. So if you want to make changes, the system actually knows exactly how each type of model is instantiated, so it can change them all at one time. Whereas if you're doing things manually and you don't have an insanely good governance structure in place, you always have exceptions. And the nice thing about a toolkit like BW is that there really aren't exceptions if you've been doing things the standard way. So BW also provides other capabilities. It provides an OLAP engine, which is central to its some of its data modeling capabilities. It provides a way to get data from source systems, which we're actually not going to use so much. We're going to use data services. It provides one thing which is really important for a data warehouse, which is a lifecycle management system. So that in a normal BW setup, it's very much like SAP's ERP. You never change anything in production. You only change things in development and then transport them. So there's a lot of so for companies or departments, at least, that are concerned about auditability and that kind of thing, you get that with a properly configured BW system, and you're in a situation where you can actually have a pretty good change control process instantiated on that. So there are different ways of doing the same thing in other toolkits and in the BusinessObjects universe, obviously, but BW uses SAP's change and transport system to manage that. So, that's just a few of the things it does. We'll get into a little bit more of the kind of nitty-gritty later on, but we're going to kind of, I think, keep it a little bit simple and touch on just those areas that I mentioned in this podcast series.
So, with all those capabilities that you just described, what would be the key competitors of BW outside of the SAP? Well, just as a comparison for viewers.
It's a good question. There aren't really a lot of other software products that do the same thing. By that I mean that are a data warehouse toolkit where you really define a purely semantic model, and then the toolkit deals with instantiating that. There are a lot of other data warehousing tools. Teradata has tools. Cognos has tools that are focused on data warehousing. They come at it at a little bit different level. So they're a little bit more database bound, let's say, and so you don't have the same kind of portability, and you don't have quite the same level of abstraction, which is not always a bad thing. It's often a good thing, but there are trade-offs that are inherent there. The closest things to BW that I've seen, there's a data warehousing toolkit called Red, and I'm not sure how big it is. They're based in the UK, I believe, and I think they have a similar approach. You define a semantic model, and then it deals with instantiating that on the database level. And then there's a tool called, Power Designer. Have you heard of that? The Sybase tool Power Designer.
Maybe using it a bit more. Yeah.
which in some ways has the same concept of BW, where you define a semantic model and the Power Designer deals with instantiating it. But again, Power Designer is a little bit more down at the SQL table level. So it's not quite the same idea, but it's very similar, I think. And I don't know, personally, I'm looking for a little bit more integration there in the future of Power Designer and BW. So I think that's an area of overlap that we'll need to keep an eye on.
Okay. Did you have some slides that you wanted to walk us through as well?
Yeah, well, I'm just actually going to go to, I have to click the screen share button. And I just wanted to, all right. I've got a couple of the famous help.sap.com pages up. So you can see up in the top, you can get to these, there's a lot of good documentation on BW. It's always been hard to get to, but it's gotten easier. And just to show you how to get to it, you go to help.sap.com. Can you see me, by the way? Can you see what I'm sharing? Yes, okay.
I can see that. Yep.
Good. And then you go to SAP NetWeaver, and then Business Warehouse. And then you are presented with the full gamut of versions that are available. So I usually just go to the latest version. One thing that's worth noting is BI contents over here, which is something I didn't mention, but this is all the stuff we're not using that is pre-delivered integration with SAP's ERP system. So if we want to look at SAP NetWeaver BW 7.3, we go here, we go to application help, we go to function-oriented view in English, and Business Warehouse. So it's really easy to get to, as you can see. But this is where all the documentation is for BW. And what we're going to be looking at really quickly is just the data warehousing aspect of it. So I will close this and hop over to its discussion of the architecture of a data warehouse. This is, I think a lot of us know about this, but this is what SAP has in mind. So it's worth kind of keeping in mind when SAP is talking about data warehousing. They tend to think about data warehousing basically like this, with a staging area which may or may not be persistent, a data warehouse area, which we'll get into a little bit more, and then architected data marts in an operational data store. So more and more, like historically these things were all part of BW, but more and more I think we're going to see parts of this split out. So BW again is going to be focused on the core data warehousing concept, and then things like persistent staging area may start to become pass-throughs, and architected data marts may start to fly out to business objects semantic layer. For example, while the operational data store may persist simply on HANA or on IQ or on another operational data store. It may still all be managed within BW in some customers, but the actual data may no longer sit in BW. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. But I think these are kind of the concepts that SAP is using when they think about how to divide up this this kind of separation of duties. This is, I'm not sure, Josh, are you familiar with LSA? Is that a common now kind of term in the business objects world, or is that still fairly black magic?
I've only heard of it. Yeah, I've only heard of it in relation to BW, so and I don't know that too much about the LSA.
Yeah, the LSA is the layered scalable architecture, and it's SAP's concept of an implementation of a enterprise data warehouse. It's always been, I think, unfortunately, very tied to BW in the way that it's been presented, but it's actually very general. So, as you can see here, none of these layers of LSA really have anything particularly to do with BW, but SAP always explains them in terms of BW. That's because for a long time, BW was all SAP was selling, really, and a lot of this is sales-driven. But this is the basic LSA, the general LSA architecture, and you can see parallels to what we just saw before. There's an enterprise data warehouse layer, which includes a data acquisition layer. the persistent staging area. And then there's an architected data mart layer, which includes a reporting layer and a virtualization layer, which starts to fly off, kind of float off the top of BW and into business objects these days, while the data acquisition layer starts to kind of sink down out of BW and into data services or other options. But this part in the middle, the quality harmonization layer, data propagation layer, business transformation layer, and corporate memory tend to be things that BW is very good at. And this is where we bring data together, where we make it, where we improve the quality, where we fix errors, do lookups, that sort of thing, and then propagate it into a format that is canonical for a business. This is the kind of core enterprise data warehouse job that needs to be done. So LSA is focused on how you split up these jobs, and then how you split them also into kind of columns that can run in parallel. So LSA also has a concept around geographical splitting up of data sets, so that you can run them in parallel or at different times of day, for example. There's no real reason to get into that, but this concept was built kind of in parallel with BW, and BW is built around that. This is really what BW looks like from a technical perspective. It's got two major pieces: the analytical engine and the data warehouse. The data warehouse is what we'll be focusing on. But the analytical engine is also very important because it provides a lot of the different types of calculations and aggregations, including exception aggregation, security, and of course planning, which is data write-back, that BusinessObjects is actually taken advantage of now in the 4.0 version through the BI consumer services interface. So we'll get into that, I think, much later in the podcast once we start putting business objects on top of a BEX query. But we'll be making use of this analytic engine. Anytime you have a BEX query, you're using the analytic engine. Meanwhile, the data warehouse layer consists of cubes, info objects, and data store objects, and we'll go into each of those when we show BW itself. But these are the basic objects that we use to build a data warehouse in BW. So I think this is the primary architecture as far as what we use BW to do. As you can see along the sides, there are various other features, other capabilities that are kind of overarching. So probably the most important one is the lifecycle management, which is more or less falls under monitoring and administration, but isn't really called out here. Most people, I would say, these days, we don't use so much the metadata repository of documents, but with tools like Business Objects data, what's that called? Business Objects Information
Steward.
Information
steward.
Exactly. That actually makes use of BW's metadata repository and allows you to actually trace back data flow through BW all the way down to data sources. So that's a pretty cool capability, actually. I think that's about it. I mean, what we can see here is this isn't very business object oriented, but it's the way that BI consumer services, which business objects can consume, now integrates with BW. But this is more the reporting side of BW, which is pretty legacy at this point. Most of these things are being. The important thing about this picture is that most of these pieces of functionality are actually being replaced. So Web Application Designer, Report Designer, BEX itself, the Excel add-in are all being replaced by, in the case of Web Application Designer, the Zen tool. In the case of the Excel add-in, it's being replaced by Advanced Analytics for Excel. In the case of Web Analyzer, it's being replaced by Advanced Analytics for OLAP. So these are all being replaced by Business Objects tools, which will then consume BI consumer services through the Business Object Enterprise platform. So, things are changing, but the core down here at the bottom is staying more or less the same, with some fairly important changes and improved capabilities that we're going to start to see in these later support packs that are coming out with BW 7.3, especially making use of HANA's capabilities. So I don't know, was that
excellent? Fairly
clear architecture? At least getting into what the layers are a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess looking at that, what we're going to be doing is using data services for the data acquisition. So we're actually going to be loading the data into BW with data services, where they're going to be modeling it and constructing that EDW layer and the architected data marts, and then building some BEX queries, which we can then consume via BIX from the business objects.
So we're going to build. Yeah, we're going to build some very simple BEX queries. I mean, I think for business objects consumption, the best way to do it is to keep it very simple and tabular. But we should be able to make use of some of BEX's capabilities, like exception aggregation, to do things like averages over a particular characteristic value or something like that, which you can do on a database level. And in fact, with HANA, some of those actually get pushed down to the database level. But with the standard relational database, these types of aggregations are quite expensive, right? So doing these types of group by queries on a relational database is very expensive, and so BW moves those calculations into its analytical engine with traditional databases. So, but again, the whole idea is that it abstracts it. So you build a BEX query and it figures out where to run it, which is kind of nice.
Great. So, let's talk about technically how we're going to do this podcast series. So we're starting with an existing Amazon virtual machine that we've got running, which is running Windows Server 2008 R2. It's got SQL Server, it's got Sybase IQ, and it's got the Business Objects platform. It's BI4 Service Pack 4. And we've got data services on there. We've got Information Steward. We've got all the business objects tools. So Webby, Crystal, Explorer, Excelsius. So we're going to be adding to that the BW stack. So Ethan, do you want to just share what the version numbers are of that and how we're setting that up?
Yeah. So we're going to be using BW. Well, let me actually switch back to a screen share again, because it's best to actually. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Because it's best to actually show it, because if you think business object support packs are complicated these days, you haven't seen anything yet. So with BW, we have so with business objects now, there's this concept of a major version and a support pack, right? So we've got SP4, BI 4.0, SP4, right? With BW, we add in the concept of an enhancement package, which comes between a major version and a support package. So it's kind of like a mini version, I guess you would say. And the way that we usually talk about these is the major version is like 7.0 or 7.3 for BW, and then the enhancement pack is the number that comes after that. So 7.31 is BW 7.3 Enhancement Pack 1. 7.03 is BW 7.0 Enhancement Pack 3. And in fact, that's actually what we're going to be using for this particular demo. On the SAP Community Network, there are actually downloads available of trial versions and developer versions, so we wanted to make it more or less so people could follow along. Unfortunately, the business objects tools aren't available, but you can recreate what we're doing more or less through flat file loads. So if you go to the SCN, downloads, software downloads, and then the SAP NetWeaver main releases, you'll find a list of very confusing SAP NetWeaver Application Server ABAP 7.03 64-bit trial is the first one. And that's what we're actually going to be using. Now, the important thing here is actually that BW is included with the ABAP application server that SAP normally distributes. So any ABAP application server has BW included in it. And that's enough. So you can also have a Java side of BW, but the ABAP side is enough for what we're doing and for integrating with business objects. So we're running based on this. We're going to be running on Windows Server 2008 R2. In fact, we're probably going to be running on the same server as the business object system. And it takes a lot of hard disk space and processing power, and it takes a while to install, but the installation of this is actually quite straightforward. So if you meet the system requirements, you should be pretty much good to go. There is one caveat with this particular trial. The 7.02 trial works fine, but the 7.03 trial has a configuration error. So if people are actually trying to follow along, you need to Google the error you get when you try to start BW. And you'll find the necessary SAP notes. Or just ask me and I'll tell you what to do. The reason we're using Enhancement Pack 3 and not Enhancement Pack 2 is because Enhancement Pack 3 brings into BW 7.0 a lot of the enhancements that happened in the BW 7.3 major version. And included in that is the enhancement to have data services integration with BW be natively supported. So before Enhancement Pack 3 of 7.0 or 7.3, data services integration was just kind of a hack. I mean, basically you installed a program and you had data services, like you created a data services flow, and then you created a batch file on your operating system, and then you had your BW data source call that batch file, and then data services would populate a table in BW. And so it all worked, but it wasn't very well integrated. And now it's much more automatic. And I think, at least I am much more comfortable with that. So that's why we're going with Enhancement Pack 3 rather than Enhancement Pack 2. So
awesome. So yeah, so what we are going to do in the next few series is, I guess we've got a couple of episodes planned. In the next one, we want to, we'll have BW already installed and configured and ready to go, and we'll be looking at some of the data set that we're going to be working with. So we want to load in some sample sales data with data services, push it through the BW process, and then do some reporting on the end of that and show that as a use case. And that's more of a, I guess, simple data mart.
Yep.
But we then also want to get into the concept of starting to build our enterprise data warehouse and the benefits that come from BW when we do that. So we're going to be adding some payroll-related data to combine with our sales data. So, how effective are our salespeople in terms of the commission we're paying them, the sales they're making, and then what we're having to pay them as well. And then start to build that into our EDW use case.
Yep. And I think this is really getting at something SAP is really working on improving BW with regards to, which is starting with a pretty simple data mart scenario, even an agile data mart scenario where you need to do something fast, and then building that into a data warehouse or merging it into a data warehouse. So SAP is doing a lot of work here. We're going to do it the old-fashioned way, setting it up directly in BW in a relatively non-agile way where we would just use normal BW objects and normal transport process if we were in a real production environment. But I think it'll demonstrate that it can be done. And then the thing to keep in mind is that we're now seeing new tools added to BW, like BW workspaces or just HANA integration that actually make it easier to do this type of thing in a little bit more agile way. So creating a data mart, and then once that's set, rolling it into BW. So I think it'll be a fun kind of exercise and really show off a little bit of what you can do with BW without getting your hands dirty with SQL and trying to, and agonizing over different aggregations and that kind of thing, and show that it's a good abstraction, and it's nice to be able to define these things semantically sometimes.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. I hope viewers, you'll come on the journey with us. I think it's going to be an interesting few episodes. So Ethan, thanks for your time. Look forward to
thank you,
the next episode with you. Thanks.
Me too. All right.
This podcast is hosted and sponsored by EV Technologies. Visit us on the net at savethecms.com. DSLayered!